All right, everybody, let's talk about the preschoolers. So, the preschool age is that period of time between ages of 3 and 5. And for me personally, this is my favorite age. They are just talkative little people. They have lots of questions. They know a ton of information, and they want to share all of this information with you. Um, Biggest thing here is preparing them to go to school. They're going to be prepared to go to formal education. So, by the age of 5, they're getting ready to go to kindergarten. So, from 3 to 5, it's not necessarily formal, structured scholastic learning, but they are preparing for that scholastic, structured school environment. Okay, so physical growth has, just like the toddler, it's slowed and it's stabilized. They're gaining about 5 pounds a year. So even, a little bit less than the toddler, but it's nice and stable, about 2.5 to 3 inches per year. And the preschooler is very stable in body systems. They're able to adjust to stress. They handle illnesses much better than the infant and even the small toddler. So this biological development has really matured. Okay, so of course, gross motor skills wise, we're walking, we're running, we're climbing, we're jumping, we're doing all of these things, and we're doing them fairly well, and we're getting better and better at doing these. They're refining, okay? So we're getting more and more coordinated, we're getting more and more agile. So with jumping, first of all, they jump and no feet come off the ground, then they jump and one foot comes off the ground, then they jump and both feet come off the ground. So as they're establishing these skills, they get more and more refined. Okay, fine motor skills. So as we're getting closer and closer to that scholastic learning, right? Getting ready for kindergarten, getting ready for that formal education, we're getting more and more refinement of those fine motor skills, that eye-hand coordination. So drawing, skillful manipulation with pencils and pens and markers, and their artwork is getting better and better and better, and working towards that handwriting, being able to write letters formally. Dressing is a big motor skill that they achieve. And most preschoolers, by the time they're 5, are able to get dressed and undressed by themselves. Okay, so this Erickson, right, this psychosocial development, we're developing that sense of initiative. Okay, and sometimes these things come with guilt and anxiety. They might, as they're taking these initiatives and wanting to do more and more, when they're not successful, they have those sort of thoughts that they've let themselves down, they let others down. Okay, and then the other thing here is that they've developed a conscience, and this is huge. The preschooler has developed a conscience and has begun to know right from wrong. And what happens when a child knows right from wrong? Well, they want to please, they want to do the right thing innately, okay? Now, what they feel is right is what they see and what they observe in their environment. But they are discovering this innate learn of right from wrong. And so what happens when they develop this and they develop a conscience is they actually start to lie at this age. And why do they start to lie? Well, because they don't want to disappoint their parents. They don't want to disappoint that caregiver that they love so much. And so this conscience that they've developed actually, speaks to them. And so then if they've done something wrong, they lie because they don't want to let somebody down. But then they have to learn that, lying is also not good. And so it's this sort of this back and forth of this moral development that they're going through. We're getting ready for school. We're learning. We are learning lots and lots of information, not only just language, but we're starting to recognize numbers. We know colors. We know animals. We know shapes. We know animal sounds. We know body parts. We know what things do. We know our language has developed, and really become more refined in that we understand that a cup can be a coffee cup, can be a glass cup, can be a plastic cup, all of which are cups, but they are all different types of things. And so that understanding of language and in that more sophisticated way is occurring as well. Of course, Piaget, we're in that pre-operational phase, and this is basically it's a shift from that egocentrism where it's all about me, it's all about me, it's all about me, to more social awareness and that ability to basically view others and consider how others feel. But that's very late into that preschool, into that school age period of time. I would say, egocentricity is definitely still evident. It's definitely sort of overpowering that ability to view others' feelings and things like that. And that's why, a lot of times you have that preschooler who still wants the very best thing. Well, I want the pink, whatever it is, or I want the blue because that's their favorite color, instead of saying, well, if you like pink, you could have pink too, and considering other feelings. Language is developing. And then here we're developing causality. Okay, so this is important because they're starting to understand that certain things happen because of other things. Okay, so it's infantile in its development, but they're starting to understand sort of those consequences and that causality of circumstances. Okay, concept of time is not really completely understood. So I'll give you an example. They understand time in a sense of how the day goes, but they don't understand time in a sense that, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and what sort of that time period means in the big context of things. So in other words, they might know that they wake up, they eat breakfast, and they play, and then they have lunch, and they know that nap time occurs after lunch. Okay? But they don't know that nap time occurs at 1 p.m. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Magical thinking. Okay, so here is where magical thinking just really takes off, and I would say this is really the big one for the cognitive development in this age group. Magical thinking. I'm a princess, you're a prince, and we live in a magical castle, and there's a mean, scary witch that's coming to get us, and this, that, and the other. And so this magical sort of thinking, and I would belabor the point that it is critical that we protect their minds when it comes to this magical thinking, because they see things on TV, they hear things, they visualize things, and it can ruin this sort of innocence of magical thinking. And it can really, really hurt their brains and their minds for their entire life. So it's important that we protect them from seeing things that they're not really ready to see. And I'm a huge proponent of that. That children do not need technology. They do not need to see things on TV. Even commercials and YouTube has Game of Thrones videos in between the kids' videos, and they don't need that visualization. Their brains are not mature enough to sort that out yet. So protecting that innocence is very important. This is just a example of the type of questions that Professor Santos, myself, or Professor Bird might ask in the pediatric on a pediatric exam. Okay, so that moral development, I talked a little bit about this in a sense of consequences, knowing right from wrong, and this is really developing at this period of time, and they have that concrete sense of justice and fairness. So they're starting to understand that life isn't fair all the time, but it's very concrete. So in other words, they might not understand if they do something and they get in trouble for it, and another person does it and they don't get in trouble, and that's because there's two different sets of parents. So they might say that doesn't seem fair. So they don't understand abstractly that parents parent differently. And depending on who your parent is, you might get in trouble for one thing and somebody else might not. So it's concrete, they think if you do this, everybody should have the same consequence. And everybody should go to timeout or whatever it is. Spiritual development, they are adapting this sense of spirituality. They are taking on this faith, religion, or whatever, is important spiritually to those parents and to that child. They're really adapting to that, and they're strongly linked, okay, to this development at this age. Okay, body image continues. This is where, they are starting to have that understanding, that comprehension, if you will, of desirable appearances. So you're going to start seeing them have likes and dislikes. They are going to be, have opinions about how they want to do their hair, or what they want to wear a dress, or do they want to wear shorts, or do they want to wear sandals, or do they want to do this? So they're also really aware of different racial identities, differences in appearances, maybe biases and things like that. They notice these things. And if you've ever been around a child of this age, they notice. But what is so beautiful about them noticing is that there isn't really, there isn't bias coming from them. Those are learned. And so we can really form our children and help them to see people as, who they are as a person, not what they look like. And it's important that we guide our children to do that. Poorly defined body boundaries, what does that mean? Well, they don't really understand that if you get just a scratch, it's really just going to be a scratch. It might bleed for a minute. They might think that they're going to lose their entire arm, or they're going to bleed to death, or things like that. Okay, and then sexuality has started to develop deeper. They're forming strong attachments. They might start to ask questions about where babies come from, and usually they're very, very finite questions. So where do babies come from? And that's the question. And they're not asking detailed information of the birds and the bees and things like that. They're really just asking, where do babies come from? And so I always tell parents, and as nurses, we have to, help parents sort of navigate, because this topic in general is very hard for parents. So, you just simply answer their question matter-of-factly. And where do babies come from, and whatever that means for that family. Well, God gave us babies or whatever. Then you answer that, and that usually satisfies their curiosity. And they will, ask questions later that are more detail oriented, but those are when they're older, and they're ready for those answers. Okay, social, they are individual. That separation process is definitely complete. They do much better with extended periods of time of separation. They are need that security and that guidance from parents. They need those boundaries, but they're very comfortable with, going out and being on their own and starting to do things without their parent right next to them. Language, again, vocabulary is just increasing. Its complexity is just increasing. They're understanding more and more. They're understanding that words have different meanings for different things. They are refining and correcting their language. They're doing better with pronouns and tenses of language. So, past tense, future tense, and things like that. They're refining that. And that's what you're seeing, really, you're honing in on and noticing that they're getting better at.